Hi, I'm Gene Cornacchia. At St. Peter's University, we believe that all citizens need to understand the importance of higher education and how it affects our lives. That's why we're proud to support the important programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation.
Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership at St. Peter's University, the law firm of Gibbons, P.C., New Jersey Sharing Network, dedicated to saving lives through organ and tissue donation, Valley Bank, and by Johnson & Johnson. Promotional support provided by NJ.com, Small News, Big News, True Jersey, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
That's a good question. High five.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We're at St. Peter's University in Jersey City. This is the annual ReEntry Conference. In fact, it is called The Road to Salvation from Addiction to Employment. The New Jersey Reentry Corporation is holding this conference. Governor Jim McGreevey, who is the chair of that New Jersey Reentry Corporation, is with us. The First Lady is with us. Lieutenant Governor, I'll just be interviewing her in a few minutes. Legislators, folks from across the country dealing with the whole question of how those who have been incarcerated have gotten out, how they re-enter society and find gainful employment, and also the question of addiction. Complicated stuff, important stuff, and that's what this half hour is about. You don't want to miss it. We're here with Governor Jim McGreevey, who is the chair of New Jersey Reentry Corporation. Jim, we've talked about these issues many, many times, usually in the studio. This conference, what's it about and why is it so important?
Steve, it's focusing on the reality of addiction. About 75% of our clients are addicted or active in their addiction. And obviously, because of heroin and the fentanyl crisis, it's taken on a new emergent concern. We have 3,200 young people, largely young men, died last year in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey was one of five states in the nation that had the most substantial increase in overdose deaths. So we're looking at best practices in terms of medication-assisted treatment, whether it's Suboxone or Vivitrol, or what we could do, particularly as people come out of treatment, as they come out of jail, they come out of prison, how to sustain them for the long term, for 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years, and then ultimately it's about employment and the wraparound services. But before we get people into employment, they have to be stabilized. They have to make sure that whether it's their depression, their anxiety, their addiction, their housing, that they're all addressed. So old school would be get them a job and God bless and good luck. Now we understand the importance of stabilizing them both mentally, physically, and also in terms of their addiction.
It's called the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, but in many ways, this is a societal issue, national, societal. What's going on in New Jersey? Is it a model, the model?
Well, I think, I'm proud of the fact that we've got great support from the United States Department of Justice and also in terms of the state of New Jersey that a lot of hard work on a bipartisan basis, Governor Christie, Governor Murphy, understanding the importance of working together on employment, on health care, and also some of the legal issues, identification. And in fact, the United States Department of Justice is looking at us as a model on some of these issues, is because when people come out of prison, typically, Steve, all they have is their Department of Corrections identification card. They don't have anything else. And so if I don't have ID, if I don't have, and most people don't have their birth certificate in their left-hand pocket, I can't get emergency assistance. I can't even get into a shelter today. And so what's so critically important is that we provide identification for our clients. We work closely with MVC, we work closely with...
Motor Vehicle Commission?
I'm sorry, Motor Vehicle Commission. We work closely with the Department of Health, but it's so critically important to get people identification. Think of what it is. If you don't have ID today, you can't get any benefits. You can't secure a place in a shelter. You can't secure an apartment. You can't secure a job. And so something that, candidly, I appreciate the question, we all take for granted, but it becomes a major hurdle, a stumbling block for people to be re-engaged in civic society.
What's interesting to me is that there have been some people who have said to me anecdotally when I told them we were doing this, oh, well, that's not my issue. I feel bad for someone who's a family member or someone who's trying to get back into society, who was in prison. But it's not they don't think it's a societal issue. They don't think it's an issue for them. Explain why you believe and many others believe that's just not correct.
Yeah, I mean, 1 out of every 32 Americans, 1 out of every 32 Americans is in prison, in jail, on parole or probation. 1 out of every 32. And then when you look at the addiction statistics in the state of New Jersey, it's just sweeping the state. All segments, all racial groups, all ethnic groups, socioeconomic. It's everybody's business because addiction touches us all. And
even when we think it doesn't?
When it doesn't, because ultimately, in terms of the amount of addiction in the state of New Jersey, the increase, particularly not only in terms of heroin, but the fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl, Stephen, as we've discussed, it's that 4 grains of sand that will kill a young man. Opioid overdose and opioid addiction largely comes out of the majority community because young people get hooked on it through Percocet and Oxycontin, which are all prescription drugs.
White kids in suburbia, or white folks in suburbia.
Yeah, white folks in suburbia. I mean, a lot of the guys with whom I work with personally are like, keep that stuff away from me. The irony is that because the white kids in suburbia first got into their addiction through opioids, namely Percocet and Oxycontin, that's what drives them. And so what I tell my fellow New Jerseyans is that this is all over. These are our sons and daughters. When it comes to a family, that's when it's the real pain, that's when the real aching happens, and our goal is to make sure we're prepared. We've linked all the services, we've linked addiction treatment, we've linked housing, we've linked sober housing, and we've put them on a path to a healthy life.
Thank you, Jim. Good luck today.
No, thanks so much, Steve. Thanks for being here.
Lieutenant Governor is here, Sheila Oliver. Lieutenant Governor, let me ask you, today's conference is so important because?
Because we have spent decades in this country and in New Jersey trying to address the issue of incarceration and addiction. We've collected enough data now to know what type of intervention works. And the kind of work that New Jersey Reentry Corporation is doing reduces recidivism, helps people who have been formerly incarcerated reintegrate back into society, and the most important thing is we're spending billions incarcerating people. Most people, 86% of incarcerated people in this country are there because of drug addiction and substance abuse. So I think the work that the Reentry Corporation is doing is getting to the heart of the matter, dealing with sobriety and getting people onto a track of sober living. Education is important. Significant number of people who have been incarcerated never completed high school. Only 7% of people who've been incarcerated have college education. So we know the formula that works. This program costs about $2,200 per person. We spend $35,000 per person in our New Jersey correctional system. So this conference is important. Opioid addiction, we don't have to even discuss. It affects every county. People are grappling with...
Across this nation.
Across this nation. And, we are on the 95 interstate corridor in New Jersey. A lot of opioids are coming into our state. And then we have the issue of China and the exportation of fentanyl, which is killing people in our state. So this conference is important.
For those who say, this isn't my issue because I'm not coming out of jail, I don't have someone in my family who's dealing with this, you say?
I say this is a major issue because it is affecting everyone. If I turn the clock back, people would think it was just African American populations, Latino populations, black and brown people. I can go into some of the toniest, most affluent suburban communities in our state, and I can sit in living rooms and talk to parents who have struggled with their children with addiction and going to jail. Years ago, that wasn't the case. It's different. And we know that for a lot of suburban kids have every advantage. They start in mom's medicine cabinet. Someone had a sore shoulder. They got oxycodone. Kids are invading their parents' medicine cabinets, and that's where much of the addiction amongst young students, school-age students, is starting. But we know that we've got kids in New Jersey as young as 11, 12, and 13 years old who are beginning to use drugs. And early intervention is key and essential, but people do not belong in jail for a disease. Addiction is a disease. We have enough research and data available to us. Something has gone wrong in the brain with those who are addiction. Sometimes it's genetic. Sometimes we can see intergenerational substance abuse. We now are educated enough to know how to successfully fight addiction, substance abuse, and then incarceration.
Lieutenant Governor Sheila, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
To watch more One-on-One with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We're in Jersey City at St. Peter's University, interviewing some fascinating people at a very important conference. It is the annual ReEntry Conference. It's actually called the Road to Salvation from Addiction to Employment. Two gentlemen you're about to see on camera, a big part of this event. First, I want to introduce to my far right, Michael K. Williams. He's an actor, The Wire, one of my favorites, Boardwalk Empire. We're talking about his other work. And also your nephew, Dominic Dupont, program director at Making Kids Win, which is?
Our non-for-profit. So Making Kids Win is an organization that Michael started, and I had the honor to partner and work with him for the sole purpose of making sure that we work with young people who have had criminal justice involvement and give them a space to channel their trauma through our programs.
Michael, let me ask you this. You're an active participant in this conference. Because?
Well, mainly because of my past with addiction. You know, that is how Governor McGreevey and I, we met at it was a local treatment center right here in Newark. We had met.
You met Governor McGreevey while you were in treatment?
No, while I was staying in Newark. There was a point in my life where Newark, the streets of Newark took care of me.
How so? Were you doing The Wire?
Yeah, I was during The Wire, and I was struggling within my addiction, and while I was working, and I needed safekeeping, to say the least, and I found that refuge on the streets of Newark. I met my brother and mentor and pastor, the late, great Dr. Reverend Ronald B. Christian. It was from those relationships that Reverend and I built together that led me to Governor McGreevey and the work he started on my path to doing, started here in the streets of Newark.
And you, Dominic, you're not just Michael's nephew and doing important work right now, but your experience, your background. At 19 years of age, convicted of a very serious crime, a murder.
Yes, sir.
Spent how many years incarcerated?
20 years, 7 months, and 18 days.
It sounds like such a cliche. Need to ask you. The impact that had and has had on you, your life, and your view of life today is?
So I think it's had a huge impact. You know, I spent some of my teens in prison, all of my 20s, all of my 30s, and started my 40s prior to being given the privilege of executive clemency from the governor of the state of New York. And the word clemency, which a lot of people don't really know what that root word means, is mercy. So my life was impacted in a really huge way by being extended mercy. And that was the catalyst to me doing the work that I've done in prison. And that work has transcended from prison into the community.
Excuse me, I want to be clear. That clemency, in large part, came because of your work in prison, because of the impact you were having on others who were in prison.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
I need to ask you, why did you do that? Why did you feel the need to help others?
I think it was important for me to understand that reentry was a process. And that process started the moment that the handcuffs went on. And that I didn't have to wait to be free to start that work. I was in a place where people needed assistance with their trauma and with challenges and the different things that they had experienced that had led to some of the bad decisions that they have made that had led them to prison. And a lot of those things are huge social issues that we're having conversations about that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, such as poverty, such as unemployment, such as racism,
institutional racism,
absolutely, such as class,
such as health.
Jump in, Michael.
One of the first programs he started, I remember when I started hearing him with this dialogue, it was foreign to me. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing there? He said, oh, I'm mentoring the young men that's coming in here that have HIV. And I was like, huh? I couldn't.
What did that mean to you?
I never done time, so I never knew. All I knew was what people would tell me when they would come home, and you hear the horror stories. So I'm thinking, my little nephew is in there with this dark, and he's. I go see him, and you know, I would lead the visit. I would be crying, and he would be like,
why were you crying?
Because I couldn't take. You know, there's a picture in Raising a System, when I go to his cell, excuse me, and he pulls up a picture of me, him, and another man in the picture. He was 15 years old. I used to take him on the road. They had special ID to take him up north, right, to go visit our cousin who was then in prison for the same thing. And then 3 years later, thinking like, okay, we can go visit our family because we don't abandon our family, and I can also show my nephew this is what you don't want. So him going into this situation that I only heard about and I only heard bad about, it was very traumatizing. And then, but the other side of that is, as you know, time went on, and I would talk to him, go to visit him, he had this glow about him. I didn't really get. Mm-hmm. But he started, I would say within 5 years of him being there, I remember him mentioning this conversation about him mentoring or working with people coming in the prison that had HIV and AIDS issues.
But you know what's so interesting? That had an impact on you, and clearly had an impact on you, and ultimately over time had an impact on the governor and others who granted that clemency. By the way, tell everyone when you got out.
So I got released January 22nd, 2018.
You come out. You know what your uncle's been doing. You know his stardom. You also know his struggle to the degree you can. Absolutely. Right? What do you think you owe at that point to him and to so many others who are struggling?
Yeah, so at that point, I really had a desire to make sure that I continue the work that I was doing in the prison. For me, it was work that was really relevant, it was really important, and I wanted to find a way to make sure that I could still tap into what the community needed.
Explain to folks the kinds of challenges and struggles the young men and young women we are talking about who often wind up incarcerated, who this conference is all about, to try to get them to reenter society, complicated by drug addiction. Loaded question, I know. Talk to us.
Can I really
sure.
First of all, our narrative needs to change in regards to our community, right? We're talking about the community we're talking about. We talk about programming. First of all, it's not brain surgery. There's no resources. These are young adolescent minds. Just like it's not. We need to change the question of why are you acting like that? Like, you know, like what can we do to prevent this?
What's the right question?
So we're looking, what can we do to prevent this?
That's the question we should be asking. Yes. Not why did you do it?
Exactly. So we talk about the neighborhoods that are insulated. You know why they're insulated? What they're insulated with? Normal activity, programs, outlets for their children to go and exercise.
Resources.
Long story short, so we talk about this for my community. You know, I'm changing the narrative. I'm not asking for anything great. This is it's like, can you please put it here? What's taking you so long? Why is this not here for my young people, my children? There's nothing for them to do.
But part of it is you're changing it yourselves. You're changing the narrative yourselves with the work you're doing. Fair to say?
Well, we don't have an option to do anything else.
What do you mean? Got a minute left, go ahead.
What I mean is that we as a community, we are losing generations and generations of young people. We are charged with a responsibility.
To incarceration, to addiction, and to death.
Absolutely.
Trauma, too.
And trauma. And this idea that Some kids are fighting for a second chance that come from our communities. The real issue is that a lot of our kids are just fighting for a first.
We know you're going to continue making a difference every day, so you honor us by being with us. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. We're honored. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. We've had the honor of interviewing the First Lady of the great state of New Jersey many times, Tammy Snyder Murphy. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
You just spoke at this conference. Opening remarks, main message was and is?
Essentially, that it's a moral obligation to fix our racial disparity in our state, and particularly racial disparity as with respect to incarceration and, for me, infant and maternal mortality, which is connected.
Do you think most folks understand the severity of this problem unless they are experiencing it themselves?
I do not think most folks pay attention, honestly, sadly, which is hard to fathom. We have the highest rate of incarceration in the country.
New Jersey does.
New Jersey. 41,000 people in New Jersey are incarcerated right now. 10,000 of those people will be let out of jail this year. And of those 10,000 who are let out, you will find that 50% of them are going to be rearrested, and 30% of them are going to go back to jail. If you look at the fact that it costs $54,000 a year per person to keep someone incarcerated versus what Jim McGreevey's doing at $2,200 to help people reenter society, it's a no-brainer. We have to fix this. We can fix it.
A very serious discussion, but the addiction part of it, talk to us about that. You've got the incarceration issue complicated by the opioid crisis, the addiction crisis. Makes it even harder to reenter, find employment, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no question. I mean, I look at this almost exclusively through the lens of infant and maternal health outcomes.
A big focus of yours.
A big focus of mine. And, there's no question that there is systemic racism in our society. It's been there for a long time, and that is the biggest problem that we have with these mortality and the recidivism rates. When I look at the opioid crisis that you're talking about, I think about the fact that every 25 minutes across the United States, a child is born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. That means that a child is born addicted to drugs every 25 minutes across our country. And that baby has to go through withdrawal in the first moments of its life.
Talk about adverse childhood experiences,
Talk about
otherwise known as ACEs, which you and I talked about in
Yes.
Princeton a few months back. How adverse is that experience?
It's terrible. I mean, I think that speaks volumes.
And what's our responsibility there? Not just as a government, as a state government, as a federal government, but as a people, as a society. What's our responsibility?
Our responsibility, our moral obligation is to address this head on and not assume that because someone is addicted that, that they need to be incarcerated and they don't need help.
Could you tell us about the Nurture NJ initiative? I know there are multiple agencies involved. It's very much committed to New Jersey women and children. Talk about it.
Okay, so really quickly, just 30 seconds on background. Back when Phil came into office 15 months ago, we found out that New Jersey ranks 45th out of 50th in the nation in terms of maternal mortality. When you dig down into that, you find out that it's not just maternal mortality. There is a vast disparity, ethnic disparity, and 60% of the women who die due to pregnancy complications are women of color. Nearly 50% are Black women, and about 15% are Latina. So understanding that tells you that we have problems not just with health outcomes, which I had initially assumed. So when we started out, we had 2 cabinet members who were involved in trying to help us fix the scourge in our state. And we now today have 14 cabinet members who are involved. 14. And that tells you that this is everything from transportation, childcare, education, reentry, opioid addiction. I mean, it literally touches everything because you've got agriculture there next to Department of Banking and Insurance. You've got
health. Excuse me for interrupting. Health. By the way, we're going to put up our website from right from the start.
Sure.
NJ, which we've talked to the First Lady about before. The Department of Health it seems logical to me. But now you're talking about the Department of Insurance and Bank.
Sure. So
how so?
So I sped through that, but I will tell you, first of all, I had assumed naively that it was only to do with health disparities.
That's what I thought.
I assumed that it was access to health care either before delivery or postpartum. It turns out that it is just so many different problems across society, and like I was saying, so it's lack of insurance. That's why Adobe's involved. It is
Department of Banking and Insurance.
Exactly. Department of Banking and Insurance is involved because people don't have access to insurance.
Why agriculture?
Agri is involved because people don't have access to food.
Wow.
Environmental protection is involved because we have lead in the water, or we have high rates of asthma in cities like Newark. So everybody is coming together, and that's the beauty of it.
And that is, in fact, Nurture NJ, right?
So Nurture NJ is taking everything we did last year and putting it under one umbrella, but it's going to have the Family Festival series. It's all the work that's going on within the administration. It's all the stakeholders who are outside who are collaborating with us. It's the annual summit that we hold to try and come up with short, medium, and long-term solutions. And it's a big social media campaign to try and get the word out, which is where you started.
The First Lady of the great state of New Jersey, Tammy Snyder Murphy, you honor us by being with us.
Thanks, Steve.
All the best.
Okay, thanks.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership at St. Peter's University, the law firm of Gibbons, P.C., New Jersey Sharing Network, Valley Bank, and by Johnson & Johnson. Promotional support provided by NJ.com and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
In the fabric of America, they are the toughest threads. One of the first things they learned was the code that every service member lives by. Leave no one behind. Now all of us need to live by it too, because some veterans are being left behind. 20 of them take their own lives every day. Learn how to be there for a veteran at BeThereForVeterans.com. Honor the code. Be there. Leave no one behind.